When a man takes your presence for granted, the strongest move you can make isn't to argue, prove your worth, or chase clarity. It's to remove yourself entirely. Cutting him out isn't about hurting him, it's about freeing yourself. But the irony is, the moment you fully detach, that's when the loss finally hits him. That's when the silence starts to echo, and the echo always grows louder when he realizes you're no longer waiting for him to change. When you remove yourself from someone's life after they've consistently taken you for granted, something powerful happens. Your absence begins to speak in a way your presence never could. People often underestimate the impact they have when they're around, because they get used to giving, nurturing, showing up, forgiving, softening the edges of someone else's life. You might not have even noticed how much emotional oxygen you were providing him until you took it away. But the moment you step back, the moment you stop offering the comfort of your consistency, something shifts in his world whether he admits it or not. At first, he might not react. Some men lean on ego like a shield. They pretend they're unfazed. They tell themselves they never needed you. They distract themselves with noise, attention, or temporary highs. But silence is a slow burn, and it always reaches the places his ego can't protect. Because the truth is, he was used to having you there. Even if he didn't show it, he depended on your presence more than he realized. He depended on the good morning text he never started, but always answered. He depended on the understanding you gave when he didn't deserve it. He depended on being able to disappear, knowing you were still emotionally there. He depended on your softness, your loyalty, your patience until one day, those things weren't his anymore. Your absence becomes the loudest message because it removes the illusion he built for himself. As long as you were available, he could tell himself that everything was fine, that you'd always be there, that you weren't really going anywhere. When you cut him out completely, that illusion shatters. And what's left behind is the reality he avoided. You were a meaningful part of his emotional ecosystem, and the loss of you isn't something he can replace with another distraction, another conversation, or another woman. Silence forces him to confront himself. It forces him to face the version of him you tolerated for too long. It forces him to feel the gap where you used to be, not just the person, but the emotional value you brought. And that value isn't something people feel immediately. It grows louder over time. Days pass and he starts to notice he has no one to talk to about the things you understood effortlessly. Weeks pass and he realizes the comfort of your presence wasn't a guarantee. It was a gift. Months pass and he recognizes that no one else brings the stability, warmth, or emotional intelligence you carried so naturally. Loss has a delayed echo, especially when the person losing you didn't see your worth until you stopped giving it. Your absence also becomes powerful because it signals something else. You finally chose yourself. When a woman who genuinely loved, cared, and invested pulls away, it's not impulsive. It's a decision built on experiences, disappointments, and realizations. That kind of decision has weight. It tells him you're no longer interested in being part of a dynamic that drains you. It tells him you've reclaimed your standards. It tells him you won't stay where you're not valued. And that's the part that echoes the loudest, not just the loss of you, but the loss of access to the version of you he took for granted. Eventually, the silence becomes the thing he hears the most. It reminds him of conversations he dismissed, chances he wasted, and efforts he failed to match. It reminds him of how easy it was to have you and how impossible it is to get that version of you back. Your absence becomes the mirror he avoids but can't escape. And in that reflection, he finally understands the truth you already realized. Losing someone like you has consequences he can't mute, replace, or outrun. That's why the loss echoes, because the echo is the sound of what he never appreciated until it was gone. Detaching from someone who has drained you confused you, or repeatedly failed to show up for you isn't just an emotional decision. It's an act of reclaiming your identity. When you finally cut him out, you aren't doing it to punish him or make him chase you. You're doing it because you've reached a point where the cost of keeping him in your life outweighs the comfort of holding on to the idea of him. Detachment is the moment you stop negotiating with potential and start honoring your reality. It's the shift from trying to get clarity from someone else to creating clarity within yourself. When you step away, something important happens. You get your mental space back. You finally stop obsessing over mixed signals, overanalyzing texts, and trying to decode actions that never made sense in the first place. Emotional detachment releases you from the exhausting cycle of giving more than you receive. It returns your mind to you, your peace, your focus, your energy. You start noticing how much mental bandwidth he was taking up, how many decisions you made around his inconsistency, how many moments you spent waiting for effort he never delivered. Letting go is not weakness. It's the moment you stop allowing someone else's lack of clarity to control your emotional world. The more distance you create, the more you rediscover the parts of yourself you had unconsciously dimmed to keep the connection alive. You reconnect with your routines, your priorities, your values, your rhythm. You start hearing your own voice clearly again. You feel your intuition strengthening rather than being overridden by false hope. This is the rebirth that happens only when you detach. Your emotional energy slowly flows back into you instead of being poured into someone who didn't know how to hold it. And with each day that you prioritize yourself, you become a little more grounded, a little more confident, a little more certain of what you deserve. And here's the irony. The moment you detach is often the moment he starts to feel something, not because he suddenly matured or gained self-awareness, but because your energy was a safety net. He may not have acknowledged your value when he had it, but he relied on it more than he realized. When you finally cut him out emotionally, mentally, physically, digitally, he feels the shift. Not immediately, perhaps, but over time, his life becomes quieter. There's a missing softness, a missing reassurance, a missing person who cared in a way others don't. Your detachment becomes the moment he begins to understand what your presence actually meant. But here's the truth. His regret is not the goal. Your healing is trying to detach with the intention of making him miss you will keep you stuck. True detachment is for you, not for him. It's choosing your peace over his potential. It's freeing yourself from the emotional roller coaster he put you through. It's learning to live a life that isn't dictated by how much or how little he shows up. You detach so you can rebuild your emotional stability. You detach so you can stop reacting to his inconsistency and start responding to your own needs. You detach so you can create space for someone who actually reflects the love you give. With time, your mind becomes stronger, your heart becomes lighter, and your standards become sharper. And that's when the real shift happens, not in him, but in you. You stop craving his validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You stop wanting his attention because you've remembered how to give attention to your own growth. His regret might arrive eventually, but by the time it does, you won't be waiting for it. You'll have already reclaimed yourself, rebuilt yourself, and risen into a version of you who no longer has space for the person who once made you feel small. When a man underestimates you, he never imagines that you'll rise without him. He assumes you'll stay, that you'll keep forgiving, that your heart will always be accessible, no matter how little effort he puts in. But when you finally leave and begin rebuilding your life, something profound happens. Your growth becomes the mirror he can't avoid. It's one thing for him to lose you. It's another thing entirely for him to watch you become better without him. That's the moment the loss really begins to echo. At first, your evolution may feel quiet. Healing isn't dramatic, It's subtle. You start waking up with a calmer mind. You begin making decisions based on your own happiness, not his inconsistency. You rediscover parts of yourself you dimmed while trying to fit into a relationship that never matched your effort. Maybe you focus on your work again, reconnect with friends, or find joy in routines you abandoned. Maybe you laugh more, breathe easier, or simply feel present in your life in a way you couldn't when you were consumed by what he did or didn't do. This growth isn't loud, but it's real, and even if he doesn't see it immediately, the change is happening. As time passes, the transformation becomes visible, not because you're trying to show anything, but because genuine healing always reveals itself. Your energy shifts, your self-esteem rebuilds, your boundaries strengthen. And when a man who once relied on your emotional availability sees you becoming whole again on your own, it affects him deeply. He starts to realize that the version of you he once had access to no longer exists. The woman who waited for his effort, who hoped for his attention, who tolerated his inconsistency, that woman evolved. And nothing creates regret like realizing the person who once cared for you has outgrown you. Your rising becomes his wake-up call. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because he's confronted with the truth. You didn't need him to become the best version of yourself. The narrative he created in his mind, that you needed his affection, his attention, his validation begins to fall apart. He sees you thriving, moving forward, looking happier, lighter, more confident. And even if he pretends it doesn't bother him, there's an internal shift he can't hide from. Men often feel the loss of a good woman not when she leaves, but when she transforms into the woman they never thought she'd become without them. He starts to replay moments he dismissed. He remembers your kindness, your loyalty, your patience. He realizes you weren't just another person. You were a source of emotional grounding. And now that you're no longer part of his world, he has to face the gap. He may try to distract himself, convince himself he's fine, or move on quickly, but the echo of your loss shows up in quieter moments, the moments he can't fill with noise. And that echo grows louder as your life flourishes without him. The biggest part of this is that your rise isn't about him at all. It's about you reclaiming the life you paused, the dreams you delayed, the confidence you muted. It's about choosing yourself fully and finally. You don't grow to make him regret. You grow because you deserve to become the version of yourself you once abandoned to keep someone who wasn't meant for you. And that authenticity, your evolution, your healing, your peace, is what impacts him most. Because in the end, nothing hits harder than realizing the person you took for granted is now unreachable, uninterested, and unapologetically thriving in a life that no longer includes you. When you finally cut him out, you don't just walk away, you break the pattern he relied on. People repeat behaviors when they believe the outcome will always be the same, and he believed you'd always be there. He thought no matter how many times he disappeared, you'd still respond. No matter how little effort he gave, you'd still care. No matter how many times he failed to show up, you'd still open the door. That cycle made him comfortable. It allowed him to behave carelessly without fear of consequences. But when you end that cycle completely, you introduce a reality he never thought he'd have to face. Breaking a cycle is powerful because it forces a person to confront the truth of their actions. As long as you remained available, he could tell himself stories that you were overreacting when you were hurt, that you would eventually calm down, that you loved him too much to leave. He relied on the hope you had in him. He leaned on the belief that you would stay even when he didn't do anything to earn it. But the moment you walk away firmly, with certainty and without negotiation, you interrupt that emotional rhythm. Suddenly, the dynamics change. He doesn't get the same access. He doesn't get the same reassurance. He doesn't get the same emotional safety net. And for the first time, he has to understand what his behavior actually cost him. He may not admit it out loud, but the shock hits him. It hits when your name no longer appears on his phone. It hits when he realizes he doesn't know what's going on in your life anymore. It hits when he sees that your forgiveness is no longer available. What he once assumed was guaranteed has become something he can't reach. Instead of waiting for you to soften, he now faces a boundary he can't break through just by showing up whenever it suits him. This kind of detachment affects him because it's unexpected. He thought the pattern would continue. He thought you'd always give him another chance, another conversation, another opportunity to take you for granted. When you cut someone out completely, you shatter the illusion that they had control over your emotions. You show them that your love had depth, but also limits, and those limits are what change everything. Once the cycle is broken, he has to sit with himself. There's no one to soothe his ego or explain his behavior away. There's no one to reassure him that he's still important. There's no fallback plan, no emotional cushion. He has to look at the choices he made, the ones you tolerated far longer than he deserved, and see how they led to this moment. It's uncomfortable for him because he can't undo the past. He can't rewrite the moments he wasted. He can't charm his way out of accountability anymore. Your certainty becomes a mirror he can't avoid. The echo of that loss grows louder over time. At first, he might believe he can replace you or move on effortlessly. But eventually, the reality sets in. What he had with you wasn't something casual or convenient. It was emotional support, connection, softness, and depth. And people don't find that easily, especially not after damaging it repeatedly. That's when he realizes the cycle he thought you'd stay in was actually his safety net, and you removing yourself was the consequence he never prepared for. In the end, breaking the pattern isn't about punishing him. It's about freeing yourself from a dynamic that kept you small and drained. It's about stepping into your strength and refusing to be part of a loop that harmed you. And the moment you do that, the loss becomes undeniable for him. Not because you wanted him to hurt, but because he finally has to understand the one truth you learned the hard way. People lose access to you when they misuse it. And once that access is gone, it's gone for good. When you remove yourself from someone's life, it's not an act of cruelty, it's an act of clarity. For so long, he was able to avoid facing himself because you were there absorbing the emotional consequences of his behavior. Every time he disappointed you, you forgave. Every time he pulled away, you reached out. Every time he acted indifferent, you compensated with more effort. You, without realizing it, became the buffer between him and the truth of his own actions, but when you cut him out completely, you take that buffer away. Suddenly, he has no one to hide behind, no one to emotionally lean on, no one to soften the impact of his own choices. He is left alone with the reflection he's been avoiding. Distance forces a kind of honesty that comfort never can. As long as you were present in his life, even in a limited or broken way, he didn't have to reflect deeply. He didn't have to question whether he was giving enough, because you always filled the gaps. He didn't have to examine why he acted detached, inconsistent, or careless, because you always made the connection feel alive. You were the emotional hero of the relationship, even when he didn't appreciate you for it. But the moment you remove yourself, he is confronted with the emptiness his behavior created. There's no distraction for him now. Your absence becomes the space where accountability grows. Men often don't learn from comfort. They learn from consequence. And this is where the power of your distance begins to work. When he no longer has access to your kindness, your understanding, your softness, he starts to realize just how much of it he relied on. He may not have said it out loud, but he depended on the emotional safety you provided, the assurance that no matter how he behaved, you would still care. Without that safety, he begins to feel the emotional weight that you carried alone for so long. The messages he doesn't receive from you anymore, the attention you no longer give, the updates you stop sharing, all of it reminds him that he no longer holds a place in your world. What stings him most is that your distance shines a light on his shortcomings. It reveals how little effort he put in. It shows him that you were the one who tried, who invested, who cared deeply. Now, without your effort sustaining the connection, he has to confront the reality he avoided. He didn't show up. He didn't choose you in the way you deserved. He didn't meet the standard you consistently raised. This reflection isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. And because it's something he can't blame on you, something he can't rewrite, charm, or manipulate, he's forced to feel it. Over time, the effect of your distance becomes even more pronounced. At first, he might distract himself. He might pretend he's unbothered, convince himself he's fine without you, or jump into something superficial to fill the void. But distance has a way of stripping away illusions. Eventually, when the noise dies down, he starts to notice the emotional stability he no longer has. The genuine connection he lost, the loyalty he can't find in others. Your absence becomes a quiet but persistent reminder that his behavior cost him something irreplaceable. And while he's facing his own reflection, you're healing, rebuilding, and reconnecting with yourself. The purpose of cutting him out was never to teach him a lesson. It was to finally honor your emotional well-being. But the consequence of that decision is that he must face the truth he avoided for far too long. Distance becomes the teacher he never wanted but desperately needed. It forces him to acknowledge not who you were but who he wasn't, and that kind of realization echoes for a long time. Because when a woman stops cushioning the emotional fallout of a man's choices, he finally has to feel it himself. And that's when the loss becomes real, undeniable, and impossible for him to escape. The real impact of cutting him out doesn't come from the moment you walk away. It comes from the fact that you never return. Anyone can leave temporarily. Anyone can ignore a message for a day, stay distant for a week, or go quiet after a fight. But what creates the deepest echo of regret is when your absence becomes permanent. When he realizes you didn't just step back to make a point. You stepped back because the chapter truly ended for you. This is the part he never saw coming, because he believed deep down that no matter what, you would always find your way back to him. For so long, he counted on your softness. He counted on your history, your loyalty, your heart. He assumed you could never fully close the door on him because you cared too deeply. And you did care more than he ever understood. But caring doesn't mean you stay in a place where you're undervalued. It means you eventually choose yourself, even when it hurts. And once you reach that decision with clarity, something inside you shifts permanently. You stop waiting, you stop hoping, you stop defending his potential and start accepting his reality. That acceptance is what gives you the strength to never return. Your absence hits him differently when he understands it's not temporary. At first, he might tell himself you're just emotional, that you'll cool down, that this is just another cycle. But when days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, and he still sees no sign of you trying to reconnect, his certainty begins to crack. He starts to question what happened. He revisits conversations he once dismissed. He wonders when exactly your heart stopped being his home. This confusion is the beginning of his regret, because he realizes he mistook your patience for permanence. He assumed your forgiveness was infinite. He never expected you to actually move on. Over time, the weight of your absence settles into his life. He might try to replace you with distractions or new connections, but the emotional gap stays. What he misses isn't just you. It's the version of him he was when he had someone like you in his life. The comfort, the stability, the emotional nourishment, the genuine care, these aren't qualities people can simply find again, especially when they didn't appreciate them in the first place. And when he finally acknowledges that you're not coming back, that realization lands with a heaviness he can't shake. The echo of your loss grows stronger because he understands something he never thought he'd have to confront. He no longer has access to you. Not to your heart, not to your loyalty, not to your softness. That access was a privilege, not a guarantee, and he lost it. Every time he scrolls past your name, every time he resists the urge to reach out, every time he wonders what your life looks like without him, he feels the consequence of his neglect. And the hardest part for him is knowing that even if he regrets everything, even if he finally understands what you meant, even if he wants to fix things, you're no longer there to receive it. But the beauty of this moment is that your focus is no longer on him. When you stay gone, you're not doing it to make a statement or to prove a point. You're doing it because you've found peace without the chaos. You've built a life that doesn't revolve around being chosen by someone who couldn't appreciate you. You've stepped into a version of yourself that understands your value deeply and refuses to shrink for anyone. He feels the echo because the story ended for him long after it ended for you. His regret arrives too late, and by the time it reaches him, you've already moved into a future he doesn't belong in. And that is what makes your absence permanent. Your heart has outgrown the place where he left it. The moment you choose yourself over someone who never valued you, you reclaim your power. Walking away isn't about revenge, it's about peace, growth, and clarity. Your absence becomes the loudest message, your rise becomes the undeniable proof, and your refusal to return is the echo that teaches him what he lost. By cutting him out completely, you don't just end a chapter, you create a life that no one can take from you, and in that space, your worth shines louder than regret ever could.